If you were to lie down in a meadow, just lie there, perfectly still, you might think nothing much is happening. The breeze hums softly over grass blades. A bird flickers through the sky. Insects make their quiet circuits around unseen destinations. It seems at first glance like the plants are doing very little. But stay there long enough. Breathe deeply, let your mind slow. The stillness begins to shift. Not outwardly, there are no stomping feet or sudden flutters, but inwardly, imperceptibly, like a whisper through the green. What appears static is teeming with movement, communication, strategy, and ancient intelligence. This is the secret life of plants. Tonight we'll take a slow, winding path through their world, not the one painted with high-speed time-lapses or dramatized in nature documentaries, but the patient, grounded, breathing one that exists all around us, unnoticed by hurried eyes. Plants have been here for over 470 million years, older than flowers, older than forests, older even than bones. Before any animal had stepped onto land, mosses and liverworts were already at work, softening rocks, weaving soils, greening the land with quiet persistence. To understand the world of plants is not to dive into action, but into rhythm, a tempo measured in days and seasons, not seconds. So let's begin at the beginning, not of botany textbooks, but of awareness. The part of you that can sense silence, the part of you that feels the sun on your skin and recognizes, without needing to name it, that light is life. Because that's what plants do. They live by light, and they remember it in their very bodies. Chlorophyll, that green pigment that colours leaves and grasses and moss, isn't just for show. It's a tiny solar panel, embedded in cells, designed to absorb sunlight and use it to transform air and water into sugar. That's the miracle of photosynthesis. And while it might seem like chemistry, it's also choreography. Every morning, leaves tilt slightly toward the sun, adjusting their angle like dancers finding their light. Stomata, microscopic pores on their surface, open to let in carbon dioxide. Water drawn up from the roots travels through narrow vessels like a slow pulse, feeding the cells above. Sugars are crafted molecule by molecule and sent to the parts of the plant that need them most. New buds, growing roots, swollen fruits. All this in near silence. It's easy to forget that this process fuels almost everything. The air we breathe, the food we eat, the ecosystems we explore. Even the fossil fuels we burn are just the compressed remains of ancient plant life. Sunlight trapped in chemical bonds, waiting millions of years to be released. So when we look at a tree, or a blade of grass, or a floating lily pad, we're not just seeing vegetation. We're seeing something with a memory of the sun, something that knows how to wait, how to bend, how to bloom, and how to endure. And while they don't move like animals, they do move. A sunflower will slowly turn its head across the sky to follow the light. A vine will reach blindly through the air until it finds something to grasp. A seedling, just sprouted, will push through soil with a curved spine, like it's bowing before it begins. Some plants even sleep. At night, the leaves of certain species fold inward, as if settling into rest. Others close their flowers, hiding their colours until morning. There is a rhythm here, a circadian cycle tuned not by clocks, but by starlight and sunrise. And deep underground, roots fan outward in branching tendrils, following gradients of moisture and nutrients, avoiding stones, steering clear of toxins. They talk to one another through a hidden fungal network known as the mycorrhizal web. It's sometimes called the wood wide web. Through it, trees can send sugar to saplings or warn each other of pests. An old mother tree might nourish its young for decades after they've sprouted, even when they're competitors for light. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Tonight, we're still lying in the meadow. The sky is slowly darkening, turning that particular shade of blue that only appears in the moment before night fully arrives. The grasses around us are breathing, even if we can't see it. The moss beneath us cradles the shape of our body, damp and forgiving. and overhead, leaves rustle gently, letting out the last of the day's breath. What a curious world this is, where beings without mouths still speak, and those without eyes still know when it's light. Let's keep walking. Imagine a mind that doesn't think in words or images, but in gradients of light, flows of water, and chemical signatures in the air. A mind with no brain, but networks, feedback loops, and memory embedded in every cell. That's the plant mind, quiet, distributed, persistent. To many people, the idea of plants having intelligence seems odd. After all, they don't chase prey, they don't build cities, they don't compose music or hold court. But maybe our definition of intelligence is too narrow. Maybe we've overlooked something essential, because we've been moving too fast. Plants make decisions, they solve problems, they remember. Take the Mimosa pudica, also called the sensitive plant. When touched, its leaves fold inward, as if recoiling. If you continue to disturb it, it will stop responding, not because it's tired, but because it has learned that the stimulus isn't dangerous. In laboratory tests, this memory can last weeks. Or consider the climbing bean. It sends out tendrils that wave through the air in search of support. When they find a nearby pole or stick, they begin to wrap around it in a spiral motion. If that pole is moved slightly, the plant readjusts its trajectory, continuing the spiral once contact is regained. It adapts its movement, not randomly, but purposefully. That's decision-making. And then there's competition, though not in the way animals compete. A seed germinating in dense soil will grow its root downward, but if it senses nearby roots from a different species, it may adjust course to avoid competition. If it's a clone of itself, say part of the same sprawling colony, it may actually cooperate, sharing space and resources. Kin recognition in plants. That's awareness. Some plants detect their neighbours not through touch or sight, but by eavesdropping on chemicals. Volatile organic compounds, scents essentially, released by a damaged plant can alert others nearby. A tomato plant under attack by caterpillars releases signals that cause neighbouring tomatoes to ramp up their own defences, producing bitter alkaloids that make them harder to eat. That's communication. And in the forest, where trees stretch high and light is precious, there are strategic choices. A sapling in the shade might grow slowly for years, biding its time, waiting for a break in the canopy. When a larger tree falls and sunlight floods in, that same sapling explodes into growth, having stored its potential all that time. Waiting isn't idleness, it's strategy. Even flowering is a form of calculation. Plants use temperature, light exposure, and even the length of night to decide when to bloom. A miscalculation can mean wasted energy or missed pollinators. Timing is everything, and many species have evolved precise internal calendars, some triggered not by warmth but by cold. Vernalization, it's called, a necessary winter to unlock the possibility of spring. What's fascinating is that all of this happens without neurons, without eyes or ears or mouths. But perhaps we've confused the tools of sensing with the act of sensing itself. A plant may not see the sun the way we do, but it knows where it is. It may not feel pain, as animals do, but it responds to damage with astonishing complexity. It may not move quickly, but its movements are deliberate. If consciousness is the ability to respond meaningfully to one's environment, then why not grant a sliver of that to the oak, the fern, the weed growing in the sidewalk crack? Perhaps plants are not less alive because they don't shout. Perhaps they're more so because they don't need to. So tonight, as you rest your eyes, consider the minds that think in moisture, the hearts that beat in sap, and the memories stored in rings of wood. And know that somewhere in the stillness, something green is making a choice. Beneath your feet, in the cool, damp earth, lies a network more complex than any highway system, older than any city, and more vital than any treasure. Roots. They stretch downward and outward, in dark silence, tracing moisture, avoiding rock, searching for the unseen. But these are not just straws sucking up water, or anchors holding a tree in place. Roots are sensory organs. They feel, they decide, they remember. Let's start at the root tip. It's a tiny structure, soft and glistening, shielded by a cap of dead cells that sacrifices itself as the root pushes through the soil. This tip is where decisions are made. The plant senses gravity, moisture, nutrients, and even the chemical presence of other plants. It's a kind of navigation system, guiding the rest of the root like the nose of a submarine. Some scientists have likened it to a brain in the soil, not because it thinks as we do, but because it processes information, responds, and adjusts course. If the soil is dry, it curves away. If a toxic compound is encountered, it reroutes. If a neighbouring root system is detected, it decides whether to compete or collaborate. And those decisions matter. A root can alter the chemistry of its surrounding soil. It releases exudates, substances that attract friendly microbes, suppress pathogens, or soften minerals to make nutrients more available. In other words, plants modify their own environments, customizing the very ground they grow in. Around the roots, in that fragile zone called the rhizosphere, 1,000 microscopic conversations are happening at once. Bacteria thrive there, drawn to the sugars leaking from root hairs. Fungi thread their way through the soil, forming partnerships with roots in a delicate dance of give and take. The plant offers sugars. The fungus brings phosphorus, nitrogen, and other nutrients from far-off places the roots can't reach. This relationship, mycorrhiza, has been around for over 400 million years. It's not just common, it's the default. Most land plants rely on fungi to thrive, and these fungi rely on their host. It's not exaggeration to say that every tree in a forest is only as healthy as the fungal threads wrapped around its roots. But these threads do more than feed. They connect. In a mature forest, especially one left undisturbed, the roots of different plants, sometimes even different species, can be linked by a shared mycorrhizal network. This web transmits signals, alerts about drought, pest attacks, or changing conditions. Older, larger trees can funnel resources toward younger ones through this network, a phenomenon known as nurse trees or mother trees. In some experiments, researchers have shaded a sapling to reduce its photosynthesis, only to discover that neighbouring trees increased their own sugar production and sent excess carbohydrates through the fungal network to support the struggling individual. Not a metaphor, a measurable transfer of life. What do we call that? Kindness? Strategy? Evolutionary cooperation? The forest doesn't explain itself, it just does what it's always done. And then there's memory. Yes, memory in roots. When plants experience a drought, some remember. They respond more rapidly to dehydration the next time it happens. Roots exposed to saline soils as seedlings can be more resilient to salt later in life. These aren't instincts baked into DNA. These are learned behaviours encoded into proteins, methyl groups, and cellular architecture. It's called epigenetic memory, and it's as close to learning as anything we've seen in root systems. Roots also influence shape. A tree's crown is often a mirror of its root spread. The balance above and below maintains stability, water flow, and nutrient allocation. Even in a strong wind, the root network anchors it like a counterweight, swaying and adjusting like a dancer balancing on invisible threads. And when the wind dies down and the forest stills, roots continue their slow work, sensing, signalling, deciding. So next time you walk through a park or sit beneath a tree, remember, beneath the soil lies a web of presence, of past experience, of conversation. You're not walking on dirt, you're walking on memory. We often imagine trees as solitary, towering, noble, like sentinels watching over the landscape in silence. And yet a forest is not simply a gathering of individuals. It is a single organism spread across many trunks. To walk into a forest is to enter a collective mind. Every trunk, every branch, every leaf is part of a system, an exchange of light, nutrients, hormones, signals, and time. The trees breathe together, grow together, sometimes they die together, but perhaps most astonishing of all, they communicate. Let's start with light. In a dense forest, light is currency. Every leaf is a collector of sunlight, and every tree is in quiet competition for more. Taller trees shade the smaller ones. Understory trees, in turn, adapt with broader leaves, tuned to absorb more of the dim, green-filtered glow that trickles through the canopy. But trees don't always compete. In some cases, they share. When one tree is injured by insects, drought, or disease, it sends out volatile compounds through the air. Neighbouring trees detect these scents and begin to activate their own defence genes, months or even years before the threat reaches them. Some even alter the chemistry of their leaves to make themselves less palatable. The warning doesn't stop at scent. Underground, as we've seen, the fungal network passes chemical messages as well, slower than air but longer lasting. In this way, the forest is a distributed nervous system, slow, decentralized, and ancient. Some researchers have shown that trees growing in close kinship, same species, even the same genetic clone, will synchronize their cycles. They bloom together. They drop leaves together. They store and release sugars in coordinated rhythms, as if guided by a shared internal clock. It's still unclear how this synchronization works, but it happens, quietly, repeatedly. There's also hierarchy. Older trees, hundreds of years old in some forests, serve as hubs in the mycorrhizal network. They direct the flow of resources and information, not by command, but by abundance. Their greater energy stores allow them to distribute excess carbon, nitrogen, and water to younger or struggling trees. In times of stress, a sapling near a mother tree is more likely to survive. This isn't sentimental, it's survival. By supporting the young, the older trees ensure the forest persists. Evolution doesn't only select for individual success. Sometimes it rewards the health of the whole, and when a tree begins to die, something beautiful happens. Before its final breath, it often releases a flood of stored carbon and nutrients through its roots. These resources, built over decades or even centuries, don't vanish, they're passed on, absorbed, recycled into the forest body. Death becomes gift. Even the fallen logs we call deadwood are misnamed. They are home to insects, mosses, fungi, and new seedlings. They nourish the soil, slow erosion, and shape the next generation. In many ways, a fallen tree is more alive in death than most beings are in life. So the next time you see a forest, look again. Not at the trees, but through them. See the shimmering threads beneath the surface, the murmured warnings in scent, the exchanges of sugars in silence, the shared breath of thousands of green lungs, exhaling oxygen, absorbing carbon, drawing life upward from the dark. The forest is not a collection, it is a system, a being, a quiet civilization of light and wood, and it has been watching us for a very, very long time. A flower is a message, written in colour, scent and shape. It says, "Come here, there is something sweet for you, and in return, carry a little of me with you when you leave." The first flowers appeared roughly 140 million years ago, during the Cretaceous period. Before that, Earth's plant life was mostly ferns, mosses, and conifers, efficient but unassuming. Then came the angiosperms, the flowering plants, and everything changed. They were evolutionary experiments in attraction, using petals instead of pheromones, nectar instead of noise. Each flower is tuned to its audience. Bees, for example, can see ultraviolet light, so some petals have markings invisible to us but glowing bright to a bee's eyes, like neon landing strips. Moths, on the other hand, prefer pale, fragrant blooms that open at night. Hummingbirds like red, tubular flowers with deep wells of nectar, designed to match their long beaks and hovering style. The flower doesn't just hope to be noticed, it evolves to ensure it is. And the reward? Reproduction. Inside the blossom are delicate, precise organs. Pollen, the plant's genetic material, is tucked into structures that dust the visiting pollinator. The visitor, thinking only of sweetness, carries that pollen to the next flower, fertilizing it without ever realizing. A dance of biology and instinct, repeated over and over, season after season. But flowers are not passive. Some are explosive, like the mountain laurel, whose spring-loaded stamens fling pollen like tiny catapults when a bee brushes past. Others are deceitful. The orchid Ophrys epifera, also known as the bee orchid, mimics the shape, texture, and even scent of a female bee to attract male suitors, who, in attempting to mate, unknowingly pollinate the plant. Not all flowers are sweet. Some smell of rotting meat or damp fur, attracting flies instead of bees. The Titan arum, sometimes called the corpse flower, emits a powerful stench that wafts through the jungle, promising decay and delivering pollen. What looks like beauty to us is often strategy in disguise, but flowers don't just attract, they time their bloom to perfection. Many species coordinate flowering with temperature, rainfall, and day length. Some bloom all at once, what's called mass flowering, so that pollinators are overwhelmed, increasing the odds that pollen will land where it's needed. Others stagger their blossoms, drawing out the pollinator's attention across weeks. Timing is everything. Too early, and the pollinators aren't ready. Too late, and the seeds won't mature before frost. Some plants are so specialized they depend on a single pollinator, and vice versa. The yucca plant and the yucca moth, the fig tree and the fig wasp. Their lives entwined so tightly that if one vanished, the other would follow. But even after the petals fall, the story isn't over. The fertilized flower becomes fruit, fleshy, sweet, or armored and dry. Seeds are tucked inside like ideas inside books, and those seeds are the plant's gamble, cast into the world, on the wind, in fur, or tucked into the belly of an animal that will drop them far from home. And so, a flower is not just a bloom, it is a conversation, a calculated risk, a promise of sweetness in exchange for a future. To the wandering pollinator, it is lunch. To the plant, it is legacy. Imagine holding a seed in your hand. It may be no larger than a pebble, no heavier than a whisper, but inside it, something astonishing is folded. An entire plant compressed into dormancy, not sleeping, waiting. Seeds are not in a hurry. They know better than that. They wait for the right warmth, the right light, the right hint of moisture. Some wait weeks, some wait years. The seed of a Lupinus arcticus, found in ancient permafrost, was coaxed into sprouting after lying dormant for over 10,000 years. 10 millennia in a frozen bed, and yet it remembered how to grow. What allows them this patience? Inside every seed is a blueprint, a tiny embryo wrapped in nourishment, sealed in a protective coat. It's a time capsule, a survival pod, but it's also a sensor. Many seeds contain proteins that monitor their environment. They sense temperature swings, chemical cues in soil, and even whether they're buried deep enough to grow upward. This isn't guesswork, it's evolved sensitivity. Some seeds will only germinate after fire. The heat cracks their shells, signaling that the old vegetation has cleared and sunlight is now available. Others require digestion. The rough journey through an animal's gut softens their coats and helps them sprout. Desert seeds often contain growth inhibitors that prevent them from germinating after the first light rain. Only when the rain is sustained, enough to promise true survival, do the chemicals flush out, and the seed dares to unfold. A seed must not just know how to grow, it must know when. But when it does, it's a quiet revolution. The seed swells, the coat splits. A tiny rootlet, the radicle, pushes downward into the dark. Then a shoot, the plumule, stretches upward, seeking light. In that moment, the plant crosses a threshold from potential to action. All its stored energy, carefully preserved, is spent in this first act. The seed doesn't get a second chance. And yet most seedlings die. That's part of the plan. Plants produce seeds in abundance because survival is uncertain. 100 may sprout, and only a handful survive. But in those survivors lies the next forest, the next field, the next quiet patch of green. Seeds are also carriers of memory. Some are shaped by their ancestors' climate, able to tolerate frost, drought, or flood, because their lineage has adapted across generations. Others are carried far from home, scattered by birds, bears, wind or water, starting new populations in unfamiliar soil. Even weeds, those much maligned travellers, carry stories in their seeds. Some thrive in disturbance, sprouting after construction or catastrophe. They are the first to return after the soil has been broken. Repairers, colonizers, tiny green rebels, and of course humans have long been allies of seeds. We select them, save them, trade them, plant them. Our agriculture is built on seed knowledge. Our migrations followed the plants we could grow. Our myths are full of golden grains and sacred harvests. Even now, in the cold vaults of Svalbard and elsewhere, we store the seeds of thousands of species, an archive of possibility for future generations. To hold a seed is to hold time, past, present and future. It's easy to dismiss them. They're small, ordinary, scattered by the wind. But what could be more powerful than something that carries the memory of fire and still chooses to grow? So tonight, let your thoughts curl like roots beneath the soil. Let your dreams settle like seeds waiting for spring. And know that sometimes the wisest thing in the world is to wait. If you were to sit by a garden, not just pass through, but sit for hours, you might begin to notice something surprising. Movement, not fast or frantic, like the darting of a sparrow or the skittering of ants, but patient, deliberate motion. Bending, twisting, leaning. Motion without muscles. Plants, despite having no bones or nerves, move constantly. But the tempo is unfamiliar to us. We live by seconds and minutes. Plants live by sunlight, season, and shadow. Yet movement is essential to their survival. Let's begin with the vine. Watch a time-lapse of a morning glory, and you'll see it reach with a spiraling tendril, sweeping through the air like a slow-motion searchlight. It rotates until it finds a surface, maybe a fence post, maybe another plant, and then it curls tightly, anchoring itself. It climbs, coils, pulls upward. This behavior is called circumnutation, and it's not unique to vines. Even seedlings perform it, their tiny shoots arcing and wobbling as they seek the sky. Then there are leaves. The sensitive plant, Mimosa pudica, folds its leaflets inward when touched. It's not just shyness, it's a defense. The rapid movement may startle insects or discourage grazing animals. What's astonishing is how fast it happens. Milliseconds. No nerves, no muscles, just hydraulic changes inside the leaf's cells. Pressure released, stiffness surrendered, leaflets collapsed. Some plants track the sun, heliotropism. The most famous example is the sunflower, young plants that turn their heads from east to west as the sun crosses the sky. Inside the stem, growth hormones shift. Cells on the shaded side elongate, turning the flower slowly toward the light. Once the plant matures and blooms, it usually faces east permanently, warming more quickly in the morning, attracting early pollinators. Even roots move, not just downward, but around obstacles. They follow gradients of moisture and avoid toxins. Some roots have been shown to forage, growing toward nutrient-rich patches, much like an animal would explore a buffet. In laboratory experiments, roots growing in split pots preferentially expand toward the compartment with more phosphorus, even though they cannot see or smell in the way we do. And light isn't the only guide. Some plants move in response to gravity, growing upward or downward, depending on their orientation. Others respond to water, touch, even electric fields. The Venus flytrap closes when hairs on its trap are touched, twice within 30 seconds, a kind of primitive memory that prevents false alarms. There's even a kind of motion in flowering. The Arctic poppy tracks the sun, not just daily, but hourly, rotating its entire flower to capture maximum warmth. That extra warmth boosts pollen production and seed development, an edge in a cold climate. And then there's nyctinasti, movements linked to day and night. Many legumes fold their leaves at dusk and reopen them at dawn. Water lilies sink beneath the surface at night and rise again in the morning. These shifts are regulated by internal biological clocks, circadian rhythms, as reliable as sunrise itself. All of this without bones or muscles or nerves. What's driving it? The secret lies in the plant's cells. Inside each is a fluid-filled sac called a vacuole. By pumping ions in and out, the plant changes water pressure inside the cell, a process called turgor. Increased pressure stiffens the cell. Reduced pressure makes it floppy. In a coordinated series of changes, whole tissues can bend or relax. Think of it as hydraulic movement, a system of pressurized water pulses and molecular switches that allow for complex behavior in slow, steady choreography. It might seem unremarkable. After all, a bending stem is hardly a sprint. But in that slow bend, in that curling vine or closing leaf, is a language we've only just begun to translate. A kind of botanical motion that says, I know where I am. I sense the world. I move through it in my own way. Plants don't chase. They don't flee. But they do move. And their motion is full of meaning. When we think of survival in nature, we often picture teeth, claws, and camouflage. But plants, rooted, voiceless, seemingly passive, have their own strategies. Not with fangs or flight, but with chemistry, architecture, and subtle subterfuge. Because being edible is dangerous, and plants, despite offering themselves as food, are not defenseless. Let's begin with the obvious: spines and thorns. Cacti bristle with sharp needles, not just to ward off hungry mouths, but also to shade the surface and reduce evaporation. Roses brandish thorns along their stems, deterring climbing grazers. Even the humble blackberry defends its fruit with hooked barbs, punishing careless fingers. But structural defences are just the beginning. Many plants wield chemical weapons: the bitterness of an unripe apple, the mouth-drying sting of an underripe persimmon, the burning oils in mustard greens or arugula. These are no accidents. They're biochemical deterrents, crafted to prevent premature nibbling. Some plants store toxins in their leaves or sap. The milkweed, for instance, contains cardiac glycosides that can sicken or kill animals. And yet monarch caterpillars have evolved to not only tolerate the poison, but store it in their bodies, becoming toxic themselves. A dangerous alliance. The plant protects itself. The insect borrows its shield. Alkaloids are another class of plant defense. Compounds like caffeine, nicotine, morphine. They alter the behavior of insects, sometimes killing them outright. Nicotine paralyzes. Caffeine overstimulates. These aren't just flavorings, they're neurochemical traps. Even ordinary crops engage in chemical warfare. Potatoes contain solanine, a bitter glycoalkaloid, concentrated in green or sprouting tubers. In large doses, it's toxic to humans. Apple seeds carry traces of cyanide. Lima beans too. Plants walk a careful line, feed the world, but don't make it too easy. Some defences are cleverer still. The acacia tree forms a partnership with ants. It provides food and shelter, in the form of sweet nectar and hollow thorns. And in return, the ants patrol its branches, attacking herbivores and clearing competing plants from the base, a living security force. Other plants summon reinforcements. When under attack by caterpillars, a maize plant releases volatile compounds that attract parasitic wasps, tiny warriors that lay eggs inside the caterpillars, eventually killing them. A distress signal broadcast into the air. The plant doesn't fight alone, it calls allies. Some plants even change their own chemistry after being wounded. Tomato plants, when nibbled, ramp up production of proteinase inhibitors, molecules that disrupt digestion in insect guts. The more they're eaten, the more bitter and indigestible they become. A feedback loop of resistance. There are even booby traps. The stinging nettle is covered in tiny hairs filled with irritants, histamine, formic acid, and more. Brush against it, and the hairs break, injecting the compounds into your skin. The result? A burning, itchy reminder not to touch again. And yet, some defenses go beyond physical or chemical. Some are strategic. Trees under heavy grazing pressure may delay fruiting until they reach a certain size, ensuring they can produce enough offspring to overcome losses. Others flower unpredictably, avoiding pattern detection by herbivores. Some synchronize mass fruiting, overwhelming seed predators with sheer abundance. It's not a war, it's a balance. Plants offer their leaves, fruits and seeds, but on their own terms. They engage in mutualism, but defend against exploitation. They risk being eaten, but only to ensure their legacy travels further. So the next time you eat a salad, or nibble a leaf of mint, or pluck a berry from a bush, remember, you're not just tasting flavour. You're navigating a defence system honed by millions of years. A system that resists, adapts, negotiates and, when needed, fights back. In the plant world, stillness does not mean surrender. It means knowing exactly when to act. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine time not in minutes or hours, but in seasons. Not in quick glances at a ticking second hand, but in the slow turning of a sunflower's head, or the centuries etched in the rings of a redwood. Plants do not rush, they do not multitask. Their time is measured in unfolding, in waiting, in returning. It is circular, not linear, rhythmic, not relentless. To understand plants, we must learn their sense of time. Let's begin with the circadian rhythm, the inner clock shared by nearly all living things. In plants, this rhythm governs when leaves open, when flowers bloom, when stomata close for the night. These cycles aren't triggered by the sun directly. They're internal, set like a gentle metronome that anticipates the day. Even when kept in constant darkness, a plant will continue its daily rhythm for several days, waking, sleeping, growing, guided by something deep within its cells. Then there are the longer rhythms. Photoperiodism is how plants measure the length of night, not day, to decide when to flower. Some, like chrysanthemums, bloom as nights grow longer in autumn. Others, like lettuce, need short nights and long spring days to begin bolting upward. It's not temperature that signals change, but light and dark counted in hours. A plant is a mathematician of sunlight, and there is dormancy, another kind of clock. When temperatures drop or water disappears, many plants retreat inward. They shed leaves, shrink their metabolism, and slip into a kind of suspended animation. Bulbs hide underground, trees pull sugars back into their roots, seeds pause in stillness. Everything halts, but nothing is over. It is the long exhale before renewal. In deserts, some plants wait years between blooms, patient for rain. In alpine zones, they take decades to flower once, then die in a blaze of reproductive glory. In tropical forests, certain trees fruit only every 5 or 10 years, timing their bounty to overwhelm predators with sudden abundance. Even decay happens on its own schedule. A fallen leaf may take weeks to brown, months to curl into humus, years to fully return to soil. But in every moment of that return, something is happening. Cells breaking down, fungi threading through veins, nutrients unlocking, a slow undoing that feeds future life. And then there are trees. Trees keep time in rings. Each year, a thin layer added beneath the bark. Wide rings mean wet years. Narrow rings mark drought. Some trees live for thousands of years. like the Great Basin bristlecone pines, still standing after nearly 5,000 winters. Their wood is gnarled and cracked, but they endure. Quiet sentinels of time. Plant time is also relational. A forest doesn't just move through years, it remembers them. Saplings respond differently after droughts. Soil changes after fire. Root networks adapt to past trauma. Even the timing of germination is shaped by ancestral history. Some seeds won't grow unless exposed to the smoke or heat of wildfires past. So what does this mean for us? Perhaps it means that not all wisdom lives in speed. That slowness can be strategic. That growth doesn't need to be loud to be real. Maybe the world isn't running out of time. Maybe we're just not listening to the kind of time it keeps. Tonight, let's meet the mischief makers of the botanical realm. Let's begin with the carnivores. Yes, carnivorous plants exist, and not just in tropical jungles or science fiction. They thrive in bogs, swamps, and nutrient-poor soils, where sunlight is plentiful, but the ground is stingy with nitrogen. So these plants get creative. They turn to the animal kingdom. The Venus flytrap, for instance, waits with open lobes, lined with tiny trigger hairs. When an insect touches two hairs in rapid succession, the trap snaps shut, like a green mouth. It's not instant, it's precise. If the prey continues to struggle, the plant tightens, secreting digestive enzymes. In a few days, it absorbs what it needs, nitrogen mostly, and reopens, ready again. The sundew uses stickiness. Its leaves are covered in glistening droplets, actually mucilage, that lure insects in. When a bug lands, it gets stuck. The leaf slowly curls around it like a closing hand. Not fast, not violent, just certain. Then there's the pitcher plant, beautiful, deadly. Its leaves form a deep, slippery well filled with digestive liquid. Insects, drawn by scent or colour, slip inside and drown. The plant digests them in silence. Some pitcher plants even host small animals, like frogs or mosquito larvae, in a miniature ecosystem inside the trap. But not all cheating is about hunting. Some plants are parasites. Take the dodder vine. It looks like spaghetti, pale orange strands that twist and curl across the landscape. Dodder doesn't photosynthesize. Instead, it finds a host, pierces its stem, and siphons off water and nutrients. Like a plant vampire, it thrives by draining others. It even senses chemical signals from nearby hosts and leans toward them in its early growth, like a green predator sniffing out prey. Another parasitic wonder, the corpse flower, Rafflesia arnoldi. It has no leaves, no stems, no roots above ground. It lives inside the tissues of its host plant, emerging only to flower. And what a flower! 3 feet wide, reeking of rotting meat, it lures carrion flies for pollination. Then it vanishes again, back into obscurity. Then there's Monotropa uniflora, the ghost plant. Pale white, waxy, and almost glowing in forest shadows. This plant doesn't photosynthesize either. Instead, it taps into fungal networks, stealing from trees via the underground mycorrhizal web. It doesn't hurt the trees directly, but it's not exactly polite. It's a thief hiding in a crowded internet. Some orchids also cheat their pollinators. They mimic the look and smell of female bees, tricking male bees into mating attempts, during which pollen is transferred. The bee gets no reward, the orchid gets everything. These plants blur the lines between kingdoms. They eat animals. They impersonate insects. They exploit fungi. They do whatever it takes to survive in harsh, competitive worlds. And somehow, they still belong to the same kingdom as the daisy and the dandelion. It's a reminder that nature is not about harmony alone. It's also about negotiation, deception, improvisation. Plants too have their tricksters. But here's what's most curious. Even these cheaters depend on others. The flytrap needs sunlight to power its trap. The dodder needs a living host. The ghost plant needs a tree, even if indirectly. In the end, even the rule breakers are still part of the web. Nature tolerates mischief, as long as the system holds. So if you find yourself in a forest and see something odd, something ghostly or strange, don't be surprised. Even in the greenest corners of the world, there are outlaws, and even they have their place. Sometimes a plant grows not by isolation, but by alliance. Across meadows, forests, deserts, and wetlands, plants form quiet partnerships with the animal world. Pollinators, seed carriers, defenders, and even tenants, each with a role in the slow choreography of survival. Let's begin with pollination, that ancient trade. A flower offers nectar, an animal arrives, perhaps a bee, dusted in gold, perhaps a bat, wings fluttering at dusk, perhaps a beetle, clumsy but reliable. The plant doesn't give away sweetness for nothing. It asks for a favour. Carry this pollen to another. And so the pollinators come. Bees, of course, are the stars, drawn to scent and colour, flying from blossom to blossom, with pockets of pollen stuck to their legs. But moths pollinate under the moon. Butterflies seek the warmth of sunlit petals. Birds, like hummingbirds, sip from tubular blooms, their heads powdered with yellow dust. Even mammals join in. Some tropical trees rely on fruit bats, gentle, long-tongued visitors that drink, pollinate, and flap away into the night. Lemurs in Madagascar spread pollen between palm-like travellers' trees. On the edge of possibility, even lizards have been recorded, performing pollination duties, sipping nectar in dry island ecosystems where few others roam. Each relationship is specific. A flower evolves a shape to match its partner's beak, or tongue, or landing style. If the partner disappears, so might the plant. Then comes the next act, seed dispersal. Seeds are precious, but helpless. They cannot walk or crawl. To escape their parents' shadow, they hitch rides, on fur, in bellies, on the wind. Fleshy fruits are bribes, a cherry, a fig, a plum. They're all wrapped gifts for passing animals. Eat me, the fruit says, but don't forget to leave my seed behind. And animals oblige. Birds swallow berries and excrete seeds far away, often with fertilizer included. Rodents bury nuts, forgetting some. Elephants eat entire trees' worth of fruit and deposit seeds miles from the source. Even ants carry seeds underground, drawn by fatty coatings, called elaiosomes, tiny treats for tiny workers. These partnerships don't require understanding, just pattern. Plant offers, animal accepts, life spreads. Some relationships go deeper. Acacias and ants, as mentioned before, live in mutual dependence. The plant offers hollow thorns and sugary nectar. The ants attack anything that threatens their home. Even giraffes hesitate when faced with a branch defended by angry jaws. In rainforests, fig trees depend entirely on fig wasps. Each species of fig has a corresponding wasp. The wasp lays its eggs inside the fig, pollinating it in the process. It's a risky journey. Many wasps die in the attempt, but both species depend on each other absolutely. Without the wasp, no figs. Without the fig, no wasps. It's messy, risky, but it works. And there are quieter relationships too. Sloths in Central America host whole ecosystems in their fur. Algae, fungi, insects. Some algae even depend on the sloth to complete their life cycle. In return, the sloth gains camouflage, a mobile garden disguised as an animal. It's humbling to realize most plants don't live alone. They thrive in a crowd of participants, some loyal, some opportunistic, but all connected. And in every rustle of a squirrel's tail, every flap of a bird's wing, there's a possibility that a seed just found a new home. Fire, destructive, terrifying, final. And yet, in many ecosystems, fire is not an end, it's a beginning. Some plants need fire, not just tolerate it, but require it to grow, to spread, to live again. Let's begin in the chaparral and savanna, where lightning crackles through dry air. The blaze comes fast, licking up dry grass, leaping between trees. It blackens trunks, consumes brush, silences song. But beneath the ash, a quiet revolution begins. Some seeds are locked tight inside cones or husks that only open in heat. These are called serotinous seeds. The lodgepole pine, for example, waits for flame. Its cones are sealed with resin that melts only in fire, releasing seeds into freshly cleared soil. Other plants keep seeds buried in the ground, waiting for the smoke. Yes, smoke. Chemical compounds in ash and smoke signal to seeds. Now is your time. The fire has passed. The canopy is open. Competing plants are gone. Sunlight pours in. Germinate now. Some prairie grasses grow back stronger after burns. Their root systems are deep, protected. Fire clears their competitors, enriches the soil, and returns nutrients in a rush of carbon and nitrogen. Even in eucalyptus forests, oils in the leaves encourage burning, but the trees regrow quickly, their seeds awakened by the heat. It seems paradoxical. Why would plants evolve to invite fire? But fire resets, it renews. It is nature's pruning. Without it, many ecosystems grow tangled. Dead matter piles up. Disease spreads. New generations are smothered. In long unburned areas, species that depend on fire begin to vanish. Shrubs outcompete grasses. Trees that require open space are crowded out. The soil changes. The light disappears. But after a fire, life returns in layers. First come the opportunists, fireweed, grasses, fungi, then the shrubs, then the trees. Over years, a mosaic of life reappears. Different, perhaps, but thriving. And with each cycle, memory builds. Plants exposed to repeated fires often become more resilient. Some trees thicken their bark, others resprout faster. Even seeds passed through a burned landscape carry the memory forward. This isn't myth, it's chemistry, biology, and evolution. Humans once saw fire only as danger, but many indigenous cultures understood its rhythm. They used controlled burns to manage forests, renew grasslands, and protect biodiversity. Not as destruction, but as medicine. Today, some of those ancient practices are returning. Fire is being used again, not to devastate, but to heal, to mimic the cycles that plants have known for millennia. So if you walk through a burned forest, don't just see the blackened trunks or the silence. Look closer. See the seedlings pushing through ash, the fungi rethreading the soil, the green beginning again. Plants know that fire is not only an ending. Sometimes it is the only way back to the light. We walk through forests and meadows, past reeds and roots, under canopies and across grasslands, rarely noticing that plants are not just scenery. They are architects, engineers, terraformers. They don't just live on the earth. They shape it. Let's begin with the humblest of builders, mosses and lichens. When life first crept from sea to land, it wasn't in the form of trees or flowers. It was moss. Tiny, spongy, determined. Moss doesn't need soil. It grows on bare rock, clinging with microscopic filaments. And as it grows, it begins to weather the surface, trapping dust, breaking stone, laying the first green carpets of land. Lichens, part fungus, part algae, do the same. They can colonize sheer cliffs, polar tundra, even lava flows. They dissolve minerals slowly, creating the foundation for future soil. They are the vanguard, the quiet pioneers. From there, grasses follow. On every continent, grasses stabilize the ground. Their roots knit together the soil, preventing erosion. They build prairies, steppes, and savannas, open ecosystems teeming with life. Tall grasses shelter fawns. Short grasses feed herds. Some species bend under hooves and fire, only to spring back stronger. Grass doesn't need dominance. It thrives on resilience. And then there are the trees. Trees are the climate makers. Each one breathes in carbon dioxide, breathes out oxygen, and stores the rest in trunk, bark, and roots. A forest is not just a collection of trees. It is a carbon reservoir, a temperature regulator, a rainmaker. Yes, rainmaker. Trees release water vapor through their leaves in a process called transpiration. This moisture rises, cools, and helps seed clouds. In places like the Amazon, forests generate much of their own rainfall. When too many trees are cut, the clouds thin. The rain disappears. It's not just water, it's water cycling, carried through leaves and sky and soil. And underground, roots do more than draw water. They release exudates, complex chemicals that shape the microbial world. These compounds feed certain bacteria and fungi while deterring others. Over time, this sculpts entire soil communities, influencing how nutrients are cycled, how fast carbon is stored, even how healthy a field remains for generations. Wetlands are another example. In swamps and marshes, plants like cattails and reeds filter water. Their roots trap sediments. Their tissues absorb excess nutrients. Some even neutralize toxins. A wetland is not just wet, it is a living filter, purifying streams and lakes with every ripple. In coastal zones, mangroves stand like sentries, tangled roots reaching into brackish water. They anchor the shore against storms, buffering waves, sheltering juvenile fish and crabs in their submerged roots. Without them, erosion would swallow whole stretches of coastline. Even deserts, though sparse, are held together by plants. Shrubs grow wide roots to capture every drop of water. Cacti store moisture for months. Certain trees grow roots that reach dozens of meters deep, tapping aquifers invisible from the surface. These plants prevent deserts from turning into dust bowls. And in the most barren of places, cracks in pavement, city rooftops, ruins, plants return. They creep in where concrete crumbles, a dandelion through asphalt, a vine across a wall, a sapling sprouting in a gutter. They don't ask for permission, they reclaim. Plants are not passive, they are builders, not in haste, but in persistence. They take sunlight and stone, and with nothing but time and tenacity, they make the world green. What would plants say if we could hear them? Not in words, of course, not in syllables or sound, but in chemistry, in vibration, in timing, in scent. Plants do speak, just not in a language we were trained to notice. Let's begin with volatiles. When a plant is attacked by insects, fungus, or drought, it doesn't scream, but it does release compounds into the air, tiny molecules with big messages. A wounded leaf might emit jasmonic acid derivatives, alerts that tell neighbouring leaves and even other plants to brace for damage. Nearby plants, even of different species, can detect these airborne cues. They respond by activating defensive genes, producing bitter compounds, thickening cell walls, altering growth. It's like a whisper passed from leaf to leaf. Trouble is coming, be ready. In one experiment, when willows were damaged by caterpillars, undamaged willows downwind began increasing their tannin levels, making their leaves less tasty, more bitter. The message had spread, invisibly. But the air is just one medium. The soil holds another language entirely. Through roots, plants exchange chemical signals, telling neighbours how close they are, what species they belong to, whether they are kin. Some signals are aggressive, designed to inhibit rival growth. Others are cooperative. And then there's the fungal internet, the mycorrhizal network, a web of fine fungal threads connecting plant roots, is a communication system. It's not just for trading nutrients, it's for sending warnings. Tomato plants connected by mycorrhizae will transmit distress signals when one is infected by a pathogen. The other prepares, strengthening its immune responses before the infection arrives. It's like an early warning system, slow but life-saving. Some plants even use sound. Experiments suggest that roots emit faint clicking or popping noises, measurable with sensitive microphones. Other roots seem to grow toward these sounds. Is it communication or simply awareness? We're still learning. Plants also respond to touch, a tendril curling around a stick, a leaf closing when stroked, the climbing vine that avoids wrapping around its own kind. These responses happen without eyes or ears. but they are responses all the same. And then there's timing. Some plants flower together, not just to attract pollinators, but to overwhelm seed predators. Some drop leaves at the same moment, creating synchronized litterfall that shapes soil life. Even allelopathy, the ability of one plant to chemically suppress another, is a form of messaging. A black walnut tree releases juglone, a toxin that prevents many plants from growing nearby. It's not cruelty, it's boundary setting. A polite but firm, "This is my space." The more we study plant communication, the more we find that they are constantly speaking to insects, fungi, each other, even to themselves. But it's not verbal, it's vibrational, biochemical, rhythmic. It's language written in sunlight and carbon, translated through shape and scent, measured in how a plant leans or blooms or pulls back from its neighbour. We've long imagined that without mouths, there could be no conversation. But conversation, it turns out, does not require words. It only requires attention. So the next time you walk through a garden or a forest, or even past a houseplant by a window, pause. There is a conversation unfolding around you. You just have to learn how to listen. Take a deep breath. And now, pause. Where did that breath come from? The oxygen you just drew in was made by a plant, maybe a leaf fluttering in a forest far away, maybe a patch of oceanic algae drifting under a sapphire sky, maybe a blade of grass beside a quiet stream. You are breathing the breath of plants. Photosynthesis, the quiet miracle. Light strikes chlorophyll, electrons dance, water splits, carbon dioxide is drawn in, sugars are built, and oxygen is released. All this in a single cell. Multiply it by the trillions that live in every leaf, every frond, every mossy mat, and you get the planetary breath we often forget to thank. Roughly 21% of the air we breathe is oxygen. Most of it comes from plants, on land and in the sea. In forests, trees inhale carbon and exhale oxygen through the dappled rhythm of their leaves. In oceans, tiny photosynthetic organisms, called phytoplankton, do the same. Though invisible to the naked eye, they produce up to half of the world's oxygen, a drifting, glimmering forest below the waves. Without plants, we wouldn't just lose the green of the world, we would lose our breath. But breathing is only part of the exchange. Plants also regulate humidity, rainfall, and air quality. Their leaves trap dust and pollutants. Their roots slow floodwaters. Their bodies absorb carbon, tucking it away in wood and root and soil. A forest, in full bloom, is not just alive. It is working, quietly stabilizing the climate, filtering the air, regulating the planet's heat like a living thermostat. Even a single tree matters. One mature tree can absorb 20 kilograms of carbon dioxide per year. It can release enough oxygen for 2 people. It can shelter birds, host insects, shade the ground, and hold the soil in place. And cities, those grey mosaics of pavement and glass, breathe easier when plants are near. Green roofs lower temperatures. Street trees reduce air pollution. Indoor plants filter volatile compounds, making our homes not just prettier, but healthier. We often think of lungs as something inside us, but really, they are all around us, green and wide and full of light. And every breath you take is a quiet collaboration. You breathe out carbon dioxide. The plant breathes it in. The plant exhales oxygen. You draw it back into your lungs. A dialogue with no words, only breath. There's a strange kind of invisibility that happens to things we see every day. We walk past trees, we mow grass, we trim hedges, pluck flowers, eat salads. Plants are so ever-present, so foundational, that we often stop noticing them entirely. We speak of them as scenery, as background, as decoration. They are just plants, but that phrase, just plants, is one of the great blind spots of our species. Because plants are not just anything. They are architects of air, chemists of the sun, engineers of ecosystems. They are caretakers, survivors, timekeepers. They have strategies, relationships, intelligence, even memory. They're alive not just in the biological sense, but in the experiential one. A tree doesn't see as we do, but it knows the sun. A flower doesn't think in words, but it decides when to bloom. A vine doesn't walk, but it moves toward what it needs. A seed doesn't ask questions, but it remembers fire or frost or flood. And if we take the time to slow down, to match their tempo, even for a moment, something shifts. We begin to see the leaf not as decoration, but as a solar collector. The forest not as a place, but as a being. The sprout not as simple, but as sovereign. The dandelion cracking through a sidewalk becomes a kind of persistence. The moss creeping across a stone becomes a lesson in patience. And perhaps we see ourselves differently too. After all, our lungs mirror leaves, our veins branch like roots, our lives follow cycles of bloom and decay, wakefulness and rest, hunger and renewal. We are not so separate from the green world. We are just faster, louder, often more forgetful. But the more we learn from plants, not just about them, the more we find ourselves woven into something larger, something quieter, something older than language. It doesn't ask us to change overnight, only to see, to pay attention, to walk more slowly, to greet a tree once in a while, to say thank you to a blade of grass, to notice what we once overlooked. And in doing so, we don't just rediscover the plant world, we rediscover a part of ourselves. And now here we are, at the end of our journey through leaves and roots, petals and spores, forests and fungi, fire and breath. But really, it's not an end at all. It's only a pause, a stillness, a return to the quiet. Because plants do not end, they cycle. From seed to shoot to leaf to bloom to fruit to soil, and back again. A rhythm so old it has shaped the earth itself. A wisdom so deep it doesn't need to speak. A presence so constant it becomes background. Until one day, we notice it again. Tonight, as you close your eyes, think of the green mines beneath your feet, the roots listening for water, the fungi humming with messages. Think of the trees outside your window, tracing starlight with their limbs. Think of the air around you, shaped by unseen leaves in distant lands. And know that you are not alone. You are surrounded by quiet companions, growing slowly, breathing deeply, dreaming in green. Perhaps the greatest gift plants give us isn't oxygen or food or shelter, though they offer all three. Perhaps it's the reminder that life doesn't need to rush, that stillness is not the absence of movement, but the presence of intention. That growth is not always vertical or visible or loud, and that sometimes the most important stories are the ones unfolding in silence. So take one last breath tonight, slow, full green, and let the stillness settle in your chest. The curious soul has wandered far. Let it rest now, among the leaves. Let the forest hold you. Let the grass whisper. Let the petals close gently around your dreams. Good night.